Welcome to session 3 of chapter 10. In this session, we're going to finish up our calendar, adding some conditionals and adding more text to our calendar to add in those events. Let's get started. At this point, we're going to introduce you to our conditional statements. These conditional statements are our if else, and the nested ifs and if else's. So in our conditional statements, we can have conditions that, if they're met, run this piece of code. If the condition isn't met, then ignore it completely. Or if the condition is met, do this piece of code. Otherwise, if the condition is not met, do a different piece of code. So this is our if and our if-else conditionals. We also have the option of using parallel arrays, or using arrays of two arrays that have the exact same reference to specific items. With our calendar control, we have an array of what are the months of the year, and we have an array of how many days are in that month. The 0th index in both refers to January. The first index in both refers to February. So being able to have a parallel array allows us to use the same index number to refer to two different values. With our if statements, we have the option of what we call nesting. We can nest ifs and we can nest if else's. So if I want to do, in the example here with specific days, if I want to have multiple if else if options, you can do that as long as your last else is by itself without another if. So you can do that to have a default condition. You don't need to have a default condition. If you just want to have multiple ifs, that's okay as well. In JavaScript, as in multiple languages, we have the concept of a switch. A switch is something where you might have multiple commands that you want to run based on a given value. If the case is 1, do this. If the case is 2, do something different. In this case, we're going to use the word case, giving it a label, so an option, and then breaking at the end of each case statement. A break will break you out of a loop. So that's how the break works with a switch statement. With a switch, make sure you have a default option as well. My favorite if statement is actually using a ternary 3 operator, which has 3 possible values. It has what is your condition and what value to return if it's true and what value to return if it's false. You do not have to use this. This is just in there. The more comfortable you get with programming, the more comfortable you get with if statements. This allows you to return different values based on whether the condition is true. So it uses a condition, some sort of Boolean expression that's going to say whether something is true or false. X is greater than 5, it doesn't matter. Question mark, which says this is the end of my conditional. If it's true, return what comes after the question mark. If it's false, return what comes after a colon. Don't forget the semicolon at the end. These are your basic conditional statements. Now, we're going to deal with our leap year issue. So leap years, as you know, every 4 years, unless it's a year that ends, it's divisible by 100, unless it's the 400th year. So there's 3 different things that go along with this. This is how we're going to use our if statements. So we're going to come down and we're going to revise the day, days in February for leap years. Okay, if this is a year, this year is divisible by 4. This is where we're getting into that modulus that we talked about. So if this year modulus 4, so the remainder of it dividing by 4, is 0, then we know this is a month that ends in a 4 and a divisible by 4, so we know this is a leap year. So we are going to set our day count in position 1 for February equal to 29. So now we know if it's February, it will resolve to the 29th. Now we're going to do a nested if statement at this point. Since we've already done if statements and nested if statements, if this is a year that is divisible by 100, but not divisible by 400, other way around. So we're going to set it to 28 if it's divisible by 100. So we have to do another if statement inside here. So if this year, and I'm actually going to throw in 2 parentheses, this year modulus 100 is not equal to 0, which means if this is a year that is not divisible by 400 or by 100, but is divisible by 400. Or this year is divisible by 400. Mod 400 equals 0. Now I don't have to do the otherwise version of this because it's already going to be 28 by default. So now we're going to go back to our code and we're going to complete our calendar app. We are going to set the first day of the month. We are going to add day spaces between Sunday and the first day. We're going to write each calendar day, then we're going to highlight the current date, and finally we're going to add our daily events from our events array, which is given to us. So let's go play with some code. Finally, we are going to write our table rows for each day of the month. Now, if you think about the way a month works, we have to write our entries for each day. So I'm going to write my function, which is going to be cal days, cal date. Okay. We need to know when the starting day is of each month, writing blank cells for each day preceding, writing all the days of the month, and then writing cells for each day at the end to make sure that they're all gray. So I have 3 different sections for this function. It's really important that you think about the algorithm of how you're going to build this before you start typing. So this is a function to write table rows for each day of the month. Okay, 3 different parts to it. Determine the starting day of the month. Next part is going to be writing the blank cells preceding the first day. Because the day the month might start on a Wednesday, and we need to put in blank cells for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday so that we can get into Wednesday. And then writing the cells for each day. Okay, 3 different things that we're going to be writing for this function. Okay, let's start with our weekday of what is today. So we're going to write a day equal to a new date that is going to be our cal first day, or cal date. Cal date. Remember our parameter that we passed in, get full year. We need to get what the year is. Then we are going to get a cal date, get month, and finally we're going to put 1 as the day. So this will be the first day of the month that we are dealing with, in this case August. Okay, next we are going to say what day of the week is that. Weekday is going to equal day, get day. Now this is day as opposed to date. It's really important that you know the difference. The date is the numeric value for the date, the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. Get day is going to give us what is the weekday that it starts at. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, now that we have that piece of information, we can write our blank cells for the days before it. Okay, in this case, we're going to start our HTML code. With a TR, because we're going to be starting the row. Okay, then we're going to do a for loop. This for loop will only happen if our weekday is not 0, which is Sunday. So remember, Sunday is our 0th day, Monday is our first day. So we are going to set our variable I. I is just incrementer. I is a really common thing in programming, so you'll use I a lot just to increment numbers if you want to. And I is less than whatever the weekday was. So if it was Sunday, it'll be 0. I is already less than 0. It will not go into this code at all. And then we will increment I for each day. We need to append a blank TD for each one of the days preceding the first day. So I'm going to do my HTML code, and I'm going to plus and increment just a basic TD and a close TD, because I just need a singular cell to put in that position. This is going to walk through all of the preceding first day's code and right up until the first day. Okay. At this point, I do want to go ahead and write this so that I can start to see what's going on. So I'm going to return my HTML code here, and I'm going to apply it way back up here in my calendar after my weekly row. Calendar HTML plus equals what the name of my function was, cal days. So I can see how that's working. So it has added this second row in here with 3 blank cells. Because there's so far no data in there, it's not really showing up in our code, but that's okay. It's always good to check and make sure that it is. So in this case, August is going to start on a Wednesday. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are blank, and then Wednesday will come up. So let's go ahead and start writing our cells for each day. We know what our total days in the month, because we can get that variable, or we can get that function. So I'm going to say total days, and it's going to equal days in month, and I'm going to pass it cal date. Remember, in this case, it's going to go up to this days in month function here, and it's going to call that with the current date, and it'll return 31 for the month of January. So I know, or for the month of August, excuse me. So I know my total days is 31. Now I'm going to do my for loop, and I'm going to say for my variable equals I. Remember, my scope for this is going to stay within my for loop, so I can keep using I over and over again, and it's fine because I have my local scope inside just my for loop. Actually, I'm going to set it equal to 1 because I want to start my days on the 1st. That makes more sense. I is less than or equal total days. In this case, I'm going to do less than or equal because my total days is going to be like 31. I want it to go to number 31. And I plus plus. Okay. Inside my for loop, I have to do a couple of different things. I'm going to have my day variable. Remember, we have our day up here being the 1st. So our day, set date, and we are going to apply it to I. So the first date that it'll come through when it does this, we'll apply it to the 1st. It'll be August 2018, but it'll be the 1st. The next time it comes through, it's going to do the 2nd because that's what I will be. So it's setting the date, not the day of the week, but the date. We are then going to have our weekday, which is going to equal our day get day. Because we need to know what the date is. The reason we need to know what the date is because we need to know whether or not we need to go to the next row. If today is a Sunday, we need to go to the next row. If today is any day other than a Sunday, we don't need to go to the next row. So if my weekday is equal to 0, then I'm going to increment my HTML code by adding a close or a opening TR tag, because I need to open a new row if I am on Sunday. Otherwise, so that's just a singular if statement, and then we're going to have one to close it if it happens to be Saturday. Then we're going to do our HTML code, and we're going to plus equals. We are going to write a TD, which is our cell. We're going to give it a class of calendar date, S. Make sure that you check to make sure that you get the right CSS. Closing my TD. Now I'm going to append I, whatever the number is of what date today is. And then finally, I'm going to append a close TD tag to make sure I close that cell. Finally, we're going to do another if statement. If weekday is equal to 6, so it's Saturday, then I'm going to take my HTML code and I'm going to add on a close TR tag. And that will add a closing row at the end. So we opened our row if it's a Sunday, and we went ahead and closed it after we did Saturdays. Finally, now we can return our HTML code at the bottom. Now remember, we added our code up here in our calendar to our cal days here. When I refresh, you will see we have the gray opening cells, 1, 2, 3. We didn't really need a closing cell for this because it'll do it by default. So it just has a blank one there. And we filled in all of our days for our calendar dynamically. The next thing that we're going to do for this is we're going to highlight what is today. Now, for the purposes of this assignment, today is the 24th of August. So we are going to come up to our total days down here, line 101, and I'm going to figure out what today is, which date refers to today. So I'm going to say var highlight day equals cal date get date, because I need to know what number it corresponds to. Then we're going to come down to after our row, our Sunday row, and before our HTML code, and I'm going to put in another if statement. If today is the highlighted row, so if I is the highlighted day, then I am going to have specific HTML code that is going to correspond to that. So I'm going to have calendar today instead of dates. Else, so if it's not the highlighted row, then I will have the regular, and make sure your curly braces match. By the way, whether or not your else is on the same line as your curly brace or you have curly braces separate, that is such a personal thing. Everybody does it just a little bit differently. When I refresh, you will see that it has it black because it was supposed to be calendar today. Oh, it's supposed to be an ID. So it's still supposed to have calendar dates. Sorry. But then its ID is supposed to be calendar today. And you can see we highlighted just the 24th. Part of the reason for doing this with a set date of August 24th, 2018 is so that everything can match perfectly depending on, and it won't matter what day you're running this. We will go ahead and change it to a new date as we go along. But as you can see, now we have highlighted our current date. Finally, we get into the actual text of the event. Now, if we come over to our JS events, you can see that they have given us all of the events in HTML that are going to be there. A couple of days are blank. It's like the 30th is blank, the 27th is blank, but otherwise they've created HTML code for each of the events that's going to be written in here. So we have a break, so that it'll have the break afterward, after our number, so we can go down to the next line. And then it has a link to the actual project of whatever it's going to be doing, another break, and then the time, and then another break, and then the cost. So it's going to be able to implement this by using this new array that we've created called day event. So let's go back to our calendar, or actually back to our August HTML. And before our calendar, we are going to pass in our script for our events. When we do this, we are also going to defer that one as well so that they get done at the same time. So when we do this, all of this array, this day event array that is being created here, will be accessible from our calendar, because that code will be called first and then our calendar code. So since it's in there, we can access it. So the important thing to do here is when we get down to our HTML code here with our I, we want to do I for this, the number of the day, and then append our day event that goes along with that day. So day event I. We're going to do it for both the first one, for the one for today, and whoops, Make sure that we get all of those concatenations correct. Another one for this calendar date here. When I hit refresh now, it's going to fill in all of those HTML things that I just talked about. And you see how it pops them all in there? It'll go ahead and fill in a link for the project itself. So whether it's the Classics Brunch or the Jazz or whatever, what time it is, and then what the cost is of each. And it put it all in HTML and plopped it in Pages, even though we still have our dates at the top because we concatenated that. Now, let's go see what this happens when we do it for today instead of August 24th. So if we hit delete, this will put it in today, which is September 12th. And you can see September 2020. Today is the 12th. Our classic brunch is today. And we still use those same events from before because that's fine. It's just by a specific date. But that way you can see how it's picked from the date and everything calculated with it. If we had manually typed in any of this, what day the month started, when did it end, how many days of the month existed, then it wouldn't have been able to just do that with a new date. In your book, we talk about how to manage your loops. Generally, I tend to say all three of these are bad practice. Yes, you can do them. Yes, it's an option. I would recommend never using breaks or continues if given the option, unless you are inside of switch statement. Switch statements use breaks, and that's fine. But what a break command does is allow you to break out of any code or any loop. If you have a loop, you really should be able to control your loop correctly with your conditionals in your loop. But if you have a one-off situation where you want to break out of your loop without using the basic logic of the loop, you can use a break command, which is just break with a semicolon after. Continue does the opposite. It keeps the loop going even if you should be breaking out of your loop because the condition of your loop would have you break through it. You also have the option of including statement labels, similar to the labels that we had for our switch statement, where it can say that you want to break to a specific location. Generally, all three of these are considered spaghetti code, and they're considered not really well-written code jumping from place to place instead of using logic appropriately to design your code. This happens a lot with new, untrained, or bad programmers who don't sit down and design their code before they start it. So if you have a lot of breaks or continues in your code and it's not in the middle of a switch statement, I'm probably going to mark you down for that because it's just not good practice. It's important to know that these are possible options, and in certain circumstances, they're acceptable. But most of the time, you should really revisit your code and revisit your logic. Make sure you understand what it is you're trying to do. Don't try to do too much within a single loop. Don't try to do too much within your conditionals unless that's how it's supposed to be. For your first of three projects for this chapter, you are going to do a similar event for the theater. You're going to say, what are the upcoming events, using the list they've given you of dates and times to fill in a table. This is not exactly the same as your calendar, but it's following something similar. You're going to be building rows as you go along. Make sure you follow the directions. When you're finished, either zip and submit to D2L or attach to your website. Our case 1 project is going to be using another array of shopping cart items, and we're going to use a script to build that shopping cart. You're going to be manually adding these items into your array, so I want to make sure you understand how to get things into an array and understand how that's designed. So you're going to build 4 parallel arrays. One is going to be the item index, one is going to be the description, one is going to be the price, and one is going to be the quantity. You are going to calculate the total based on the quantity and the price. So you're going to be building in your code each of these 4 rows in your table. You're also going to be doing the subtotal at the bottom. When you're finished with this, go ahead and attach it to your site or submit for D2L. Our case 4 project is appropriately based on election results. So with the election coming up, I thought this was appropriate. You are going to be building your election results that use arrays to show each candidate what party they're in and how many votes they got. You are also going to be building a bar chart, and you'll see how to do that when you get to the code description. You're going to be using JavaScript to build all of the code to take those values that are given and modify them and make them show up on your page. You are welcome to modify any of this site as you see fit, as long as you follow the directions. The site gives you the CSS and it gives you some details to start with. But if you want to modify it and change it for whatever you want to, you are more than welcome to. This one I do want to see in your website, and I will be checking out your JavaScript when I grade it. Have an amazing week this week. Hopefully this gives you some introduction to how to program in JavaScript. Not as much CSS and not as much HTML, but understanding, if you didn't understand the HTML and CSS, it wouldn't make as much sense. So it's important for you to get those pieces of information first. Hope you have a good time, and make sure you ask for help if you need it.